great job for all of us. Jennifer Brock asked me to do a short history of Copperopolis and also to introduce tonight's main speaker. The history of Copperopolis is entwined with mining, because mining has always been important to the economy of this area, and mining has been mining for copper, gold, and asbestos. In the 1850s, copper was found down at Telegraph City area, which is just west of here. So then in 1860, Thomas McCarty and William Reed came to this area and found copper and founded the Union Mine, and they are considered the founders of Copperopolis. Between 1861 and 1946, according to the U.S. Bureau of Mines, over 72.5 million pounds of copper came from this area. In 1861, of course, it was the beginning of the Civil War, and copper was needed for the war effort. And California was on the side of the North, and at that time, there were also many Southerners that were here as miners. By 1861, Copperopolis had 28 businesses. And in 1864, this building was built at a cost of $8,000 as a training center for the 3rd Brigade, because in case Southern sympathizers tried to take over the mines and take away the copper that was going back east for the war effort. Then the copper ore went from here in wagons to Stockton. From Stockton, it went on barges to San Francisco. In San Francisco, it went around the Horn to smelters on the East Coast and even to Wales. The flag is up here with all of this decoration. You can't see it well. That flag was made by the women of Copperopolis in 1865. Before the days of television, when most communities in Calaveras County had what I think of as 3 things. They generally had a baseball team that traveled to the other towns and played baseball. They also had card parties where they played Pedro and whist, and people traveled from town to town and played in others. And they had dances. So this building especially was used for dances and also for card parties. This corner situation over here was added in the 1990s. Before that, that was all benches, and that's where we small children sat while the adults danced. And then at midnight, they served dinner to the adults in the back part, and then we were taken home to my grandmother as children. That's one of my memories. By 1865, Copperopolis had thousands of people and 91 businesses. But in 1867, the bulk of the town burned down, the main part of the town. What was still left were the remnants of what's next door. I don't know the correct pronunciation, so if I get it wrong, I'll call it the Honigsberger store, and next to it the Reed store. And also built in 1866 was the brick Gothic Revival building, that direction, which was originally a congregational church. Then it was an Oddfellows Hall, and then in 1939 it became known as the community center, the Copperopolis Community Center. And the community center didn't have a kitchen like this building, since it had been a church. So it was used for things like celebrations of Christmas, celebrations of Easter, card parties, of course, and other social events. In 1999, the community center did a structural survey of that building, which was built in 1866, and found that the roof was never attached to the building. And it's considered to be the only Gothic revival building of that era that's still being used as a church. I guess a local church here uses it for meetings. Other important buildings here in Copperopolis, another was the school. The first school was built in 1865, and then it burned down in 1907. The next school was the one that my mother attended, I attended, my aunts, my uncle, my cousins attended, and that one was torn down in 1967 for the current school. Two things that are located at the school. When I went to school there, in the second school, at the front where the flagpole was, there was also the bell from the original school that was built in 1865, and it still sits in front of the current school. And the other thing that was always in front of the school that the kids played on was a cannon. The cannon was originally here with the 3rd Brigade, and then eventually it was moved from here at the Armory to the school. Other important buildings here in town, the old Corner Saloon, which is still in business, is the oldest wood frame building that still exists. They have a sign that says 1862, but that one probably burned down. The current one is from I've got it here, I lost my place. 1889 is the current one, and that's always an interesting place. Next to it, well, it was originally one story, just a saloon. Then rooms were built above as a hotel and also as a brothel. When I was a kid, you could even go in there and get an ice cream cone. So it's been lots of different things. Near that is what is called the Union Mine Store, and in recent years it was called McCarty's Store. And now it's no longer in business. And if you stand and face the building, there's a little bump out to the left, and that little bump out to the left was the Copperopolis post office. And Bud Steffen's grandmother was the postmistress when I was a child. Also in this area there were gold mines. My great-grandfather and my grandfather were both millmen in gold mines, especially in this area. And the gold mines were the Napoleon, the Hog Hill, the Alta, the Royal, the Mountain King, the Wilbur Womble, and there were also others. Those are the ones my family talked about because those were the places where they lived and worked. In the 1990s, Meridian Gold came in and did a major gold mining operation at the old site of Hodson, which is where the Royal and the Mountain King are. And a lot of you know that I was a teacher, and I used to bring my class down to the Royal and the Mountain King operation that was going then. And it was interesting. I remember my great uncle saying there was always gold here, but they always needed a cyanide plant to get the rest of the gold. So Meridian Gold did put in the cyanide plant, and that was interesting to see. If you've ever seen a cyanide plant, it looked like black bubbles, and I guess the gold was on the outside of the bubbles. I have no idea, but I did get some interesting things that happened when we went there is when they were working on that site, they found the remains of Indians. So they had to bring in archaeologists, and all these people in my class got to see the skeletons of these people that they were working on and everything to bring out. And then later on, from our ranch on Rock Creek Road, my husband saw where they buried all of these people and put on their ceremonies that was supposed to be like in a place where no one would know and would disturb them. And the other thing I got to do there was I got to hold what you call a gold brick or a gold bar. The interesting thing was it was not all gold, it was partly silver, which you don't think of around here as silver being involved. And those gold bars were trucked basically over to Nevada. And I don't know where they went after they went to Nevada, but that's what they told us. Also in the 70s and 80s, there was an asbestos mining operation at the Bowie Ranch south of us. And that employed a lot of people in this area. And I believe still that area is now a place for asbestos toxic waste, as far as I know. So that's my little, but this building has lots and lots of memories. This building has been used, I think the first time I ever went to a wedding was at the wedding of Bud Steffen's aunt and uncle right after World War II, Bob and Kathleen Supinger. This building was used for funerals, retirement parties. In the 1990s, there were a group of us that came here and we had Pedro parties on Saturday nights. And the one thing I want to say about the McCarty family, of Thomas McCarty, who was the founder of the town, his family is still very active and still lives in this area and very important for this whole community. So that's my little short history of Copperopolis. So, where did Alvin? Oh, there he is. When Jennifer asked me to do this, and she told me I was going to introduce Alvin, I told her a little anecdote. And she said Jennifer wanted me to include that. Some of the people in this room knew my uncle Al Sola. And my uncle Al Sola always said the prettiest girl at Red Heart High School was Annie Williams. Annie Williams is Alvin's grandmother. Here's Alvin.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alvin Brolio, and I'm employed by Calaveras Telephone. I've been there about 14 plus years now. I took over, I started there doing install and repairs. I took over for a gentleman named Ed Gazine, who retired out, and God rest his soul. Retired out a few years back, and I am now assistant general manager and purchasing warehouse guy up there too. So we wear a lot of different hats over there. It's an amazing place to work. To tell you a little history about it, it's actually a fourth generation company now. We serve roughly around 3,500 to 4,000 customers, depending on when people move and influxes and different things like that. We cover a 250 square mile service area, and we're one of about 15 independent, we're called an ILEC, an independent local exchange carrier. We're different than AT&T and that type of thing. We're small and family owned and run. There's only a few of us in the state of California, and I want to say somewhere in between around 1,400 in the whole United States of independent phone companies. It started off with the Calaveras Telephone Company started off with a gentleman named Barbed Wire Jim. In the summer of 1895, James A. Tower was 16. He decided to copy the telephone system that was at down in Oakland at a school he attended. When he returned back to the family's cattle ranch out in Salt Springs Valley that's still there today, and they still run cattle on it. When he returned there, he decided he wanted to do this, and he ran phone lines between his mom's house and uncles and cousins and everything out that way. And that then established the basis of his successful business. I lost my place. Okay. So, he got the name Barbed Wire Jim by not exactly running the phone line across the barbed wire, since all of us kind of know what barbed wire is. He actually put insulators on top of the posts and ran the telephone wire across there. At that time, there was no real regulations, I think until 1939, when the Federal Communication Act was put in place. So there wasn't a whole lot of regulation. The worst thing that you had to worry about was a cow rubbing against the T-post and knocking your phone line down. Now we deal with all sorts of stuff. Guys running excavators, gophers, rocks, lightning strikes. There's all sorts of fun stuff to take out your phone lines at this time, and fiber optic lines. In the early days, it was just his family, and then every rancher, miner, businessman, all wanted to have this telephone service. Even his brother Jacob, who had a butcher shop, wanted to communicate so they could place orders daily and talk to each other about buying cattle for the butcher shop. In 1899, Jim actually talked and negotiated with Alexander Graham Bell to get equipment and a connection agreement with Pacific Telephone to get out to the world. So at that point now, you're just not talking in Copperopolis, you're actually getting to talk out to the world. In 1909, Jim married one of his operators, Laura, and in 1923, they had a son named Howard. And that's kind of where I am familiar with. I've known Howard and Ellen my entire life, so that's kind of where my story picks up. So they had their son Howard in 1923. Jim then died at the age of 56 in 1936 at a young age, leaving behind Laura and 12-year-old Howard, both responsible for the operations of the company. The two of them had to keep the business running, from fixing phone lines and handing out phone books to everybody. In 1949, Howard Tower, then 27 years old, installed the first automatic switching equipment in the county at the family's garage, so it was run out of their house. Dial tone meant that Laura and Howard had to replace all those phones. It wasn't the old crank phone and you called the operator anymore and they gave you to Joe. You actually dialed the phone number now. So they had to go replace all those at their cost. The more automatic switchings means that all these customers on the crank phones had to be replaced. I've lost my place, I'm sorry. Oh, the company needed to modernize in 1960. And at this point, or in the 60s, is when the asbestos plant, what Joni talked about, came into play. And that was a big economic boost for Copperopolis. And at that point, they got some funding from RUS and some federal funds and took out loans. And Howard decided to bury all of the phone lines, no longer attached to the telephone poles, and we took our plant underground, which actually has served us very well. In 1962, all the telephone lines were buried, and the Calaveras Telecompany was operating, and and we also put in the new CO at Copperopolis and Jenny Lind with that funding also, and picking up more customers. And then we went to a digital switch in 1979. Jenny Lind. In 1990, Howard named his son James vice president and general manager. And when Howard passed away in 2003, the company was then kind of turned over to his children, John, James, and Mary. And now their children are working there, from Frank, Amelia, Shannon, and there'll be some more maybe coming down with Robert too. So they're starting to take a role into the phone company also. Also in the early 90s became the internet, now the interweb. So that was a big deal. And in the early 90s, we also first, according to Dave and some other people, 1990 is when the first fiber optic cable went into the copper CO. And ever since then, we've been putting fiber optic cable in the ground as fast as we can do it. And I'll go into that a little more too. But in the 90s came dial-up internet, which seems very barbaric and slow now. And then we went to DSL, and now in Saddle Creek, Copper, Calypso, we have fiber to the side of your house that we're actively and progressively pursuing. We offer internet protocol IPTV, so we offer TV service, phone service, and data, which everybody's after data at the moment. And we actually serve about a third of our customers with fiber to the home, like I mentioned before, in Corner, Calypso, Peninsula estates, just to name a few. And our next 5 to 7 year goal is Jim would like to have 80% coverage of our territory, which goes from Jenny Lynn to the Vista Point to Bar 20, basically, to the bridge. We're trying to put it even in Diamond South right now. We're working out Diamond South, and we're going to do Diamond North. So even the 20-acre parcels, we're trying to get fiber to the home for people. And we're also shortening what would be called loop lengths, the length of the cable. We're putting in smaller, more remote equipment sites for people that are on our copper facility still that we don't have the fiber to. By shortening that loop length, we get you faster speeds, and everybody wants faster speeds at the moment. Calaveras Telephone and the Tower family is an amazing place to work and an amazing place to be part of. The Tower family supports this community in so many ways, from baseball to school events to supporting our 4-H and local FFA kids. And I'm proud to be a part of this whole adventure. And I plan to be here for many, many years. So if you guys don't mind, and I'm going to tie in with what Joni was talking about, there's also 2 buildings that Howard purchased, and during the late 80s, they refurbished them right over here, which is the internet company and the olive oil. And on the other side of that, which I think is called if my memory serves me correctly, is the Hodson. There's a small museum in there, which has a lot of stuff from McCarty's, a lot of history. So if we would like to walk over there real quick, you guys can ask me more questions about the Tower family or anything, and I will try and answer any questions about the stuff that is in there. But there's some old carriages, there's the old post office, there's mining stuff, there's all sorts of fun stuff over there. So if you guys wouldn't mind, we could all take a walk if you'd like to, and you guys can ask me some more questions.
Howard Tower's funeral was in this room in the
Yes.
armory.
Yep.
And Howard Tower had a Dodge Viper car. And they had pictures of all these Viper events and all these Viper pictures, panoramas around the room.
He also was into motorcycles too. He has a beautiful Indian motorcycle. He liked to go fast, apparently. So, and the car is still out there at the ranch, and the Indian and the brothers and sisters, I think, drive him from time to time to keep him moving. I'll drive him if they don't want to. So, yes.
It used to be the name Felix. What was that?
Felix Road out there was actually a little community, is where.
Felix phone service or something?
My grandmother's phone number was Felix 2129.
Felix 2129, and it was that community out there by Salt Springs Reservoir, and then this was Copperopolis to my knowledge, and Jenny Lynn also, but that's Felix Road out there. It had that prefix, that Felix community. I don't think it ever was a per se town, but it was a town then. Okay, so yeah, that is. And if anybody else has any questions, throw them at me, and I'll try and answer.
Nassau as well?
Say that again.
Nassau, a little community up there?
I've never heard of Nassau.
Nassau wasn't there.
No.
The territory stops at the bridge. So where was Nassau at? Oh, yeah. Nope, I've never. That would be news. I don't know that one.
That's between here and Bar 20, the Nassau Valley.
The Nassau Valley? I don't know of any.
Well, it's on Highway 4 goes through it.
Okay.
It's between here and Bar 20.
So is it just past Pool Station there?
Yeah. Between Pool Station and Bar 20, there's an area known as Nassau Valley.
Oh, I've never heard of any service phone service that we had there. We've had Milton.
You also had Elkhorn Station too, which was a little closer to Angel.
Right, Elkhorn Station is just past Bar 20, and that is actually the very end of our service territory, is right there at Elkhorn Station. We actually service Nick and right there, Valeni right there. That's the very end of our service territory. What else? Anybody else have any more questions for me at the moment? Okay. Well, if anybody would like to, let's take a walk over there and go check out the museum for a minute and look at it. Joe's going.